Plenty of intriguing storylines ahead of this weekend Super Bowl, and joining me now to discuss the inimitable Peter King. Peter, it's always good to be with you. Let's start with the Eagles' offensive line. Can you put their talent into context for us?
You know, I was with Jeff Stoutland, their coach yesterday, the offensive line coach, run game coordinator for the Eagles. And first of all, I think he is terrific. I think he's state of the art in the game today. But, you know, it's amazing what he has done with guys who, from left to right, you know, first of all, the left tackle is a guy named Jordan Mailata, who is a former rugby player from Australia. I mean, he's just a mountain of a guy. And he had no idea how to play the sport of football when he came to the United States to try. And they invented a left tackle out of Jordan Mailata. But I think, Carolyn, to explain how good this line is, just think that in their two playoff games, the Giants have a good defensive line. You know, Dexter Lawrence is an all-pro type player. And then the San Francisco 49ers with probably the defensive player of the year in Nick Bosa. And think about it. They didn't get their defensive lines of those two great defenses, got 0 sacks and 0 hits on Jalen Hurts in the playoffs. And so I kind of look at it and think to myself, we are really watching one of the best offensive lines in recent NFL annals. So I think I really think that's the key to the game, Carolyn, because if you think about it, you know that the Eagles are, you know, who led the world in sacks this year, they're going to get pressure on Patrick Mahomes. Can the Kansas City Chiefs get pressure on Jalen Hurts? I think it's a huge factor in this game.
We'll see. And I thought the key to the game was going to be that depth that they have at pass rush and whether they can get to the quarterback. But you're saying that that's pretty much a given, how talented they are, the fact that they don't even need the blitz, leading the league in sacks.
I mean, it's amazing. They got 75% of their sacks this year, leading the NFL. They got 75% of their sacks without blitzing. They rushed 4 or fewer players on 75% of them. And that's incredible. And what that means is that Patrick Mahomes is going to have to find receivers with 7 people in coverage. That's daunting.
Yeah. One of the big storylines heading into the week is the fact that we're going to see history made before the game begins with a pair of black quarterbacks leading their team. And we know the numbers of historically the number of black quarterbacks that have made it to the Super Bowl. It's a very small group. How important is this?
I kind of look at it as when I heard about this, and I didn't even think of it until maybe a few hours after the matchup was set, and somebody wrote that, and I said, wow, that's right. But, Carolyn, I think it was just a matter of time before it happened because there are a lot of really good black quarterbacks in the NFL right now. So, I think it's a big deal, but I think it's going to happen often in our lifetimes. And the good thing what I like the most about these two players is they sort of, especially Mahomes, I think Mahomes has the will of Tom Brady. When Tom Brady retired, he bequeathed his ethos to Patrick Mahomes, and Jalen Hurts is just like that too. I mean, he is going to find a way. That's how he plays the sport, and he'll figure it out. He's son of a coach and all that. So I think both of these guys are going to be great for 15 years.
You wrote about you offered some of that insight about Tom Brady and the relationship with Patrick Mahomes and how special that was. I mean, you have covered Tom Brady over the entire span of his career and written about him, at length. What was the first thing that you thought when I saw the video of him announcing his retirement? I was kind of struck by the authenticity of it. It was straightforward, the simplicity of it. What will you sort of take away from him as a quarterback? How do you even start to put his career in context?
I mean, it's really hard because here's the thing, Carolyn. He's just different I don't think there's going to be a bunch of players now who are going to play until they're 45. I mean, somebody else might, but it's not like this is going to start a trend. The big deal about this, and it's very interesting to me that, in the last few days, because I wrote the other day, Tom Brady threw for more touchdowns after turning 33 than Dan Marino threw in his career. And that's insane. But as a lot of readers rightfully pointed out to me in emails, the game was really different for Marino. He could get his clock cleaned. Excuse me. He could really get beat up in a game, and there was a lot more physical contact with quarterbacks. Really the same with Joe Montana. And, Montana and Marino played in an era when the rules weren't as slanted toward quarterbacks. And look, Tom Brady did not retire because he was physically unable to play. If you think about it, Carolyn, the last 14 years of Tom Brady's career, he never one time missed a game because of injury. And so, I think players are going to be able to play longer. I don't necessarily think they will, but I think what really makes Brady different and will stand the test of time is that he had some of his greatest moments. If you look at it, it sounds ridiculous. He was a better quarterback in his 40s than he was in his 20s in almost all ways, statistical and otherwise.
When you look at the quarterbacks in the league today, I know you said Mahomes maybe has some of those intangibles, that desire and will to win. And a lot of people have drawn some initial comparisons with Joe Burrow. I mean, are we going to see quarterbacks in the league that have pieces of him, but might not be the complete version of him?
I think that is a great question. I think it's a great point. There are so many guys. I mean, you talk to Joe Burrow. I saw an interview with him in which he said, he remembers when he was a kid seeing Tom Brady depleted in a game against Buffalo, and he got right up and he goes, that's the way I want to play quarterback. I want to be a tough guy, just like Brady. And so, when you're young and you watch football and you watch the great players at whatever position you're playing, you want to emulate them. And in my opinion, I think you'll see a lot of players trying to take little pieces of Tom Brady, year after year. And so I think you will see that in the coming years.
I have a nephew who just turned 9 who lives in St. Petersburg, and I was just down there. He plays flag football, a standout quarterback, really impressive among the 8 to 9-year-old group. And on the back of his door, I noticed there's a poster of Tom Brady, a 45-year-old quarterback, and this kid's 9. So I wonder, how long that's going to sort of last, and if it extends far beyond the likes of Joe Burrow and some of these younger kids that got a chance to see him play incredibly, into his 40s. Just back to Mahomes and Jalen Hurts, because of what you mentioned, the Eagles' offensive line and then also the pass rush that can potentially disrupt Mahomes, would you give the edge to the Eagles this weekend on those two factors alone?
I would, because, the other thing about the Eagles, Carolyn, is that they will play 9 defensive linemen at least 10 snaps in this game. And that's one of the things that Howie Roseman, the GM of the Eagles, has built so intelligently. He was trained in the business by Andy Reid because he was hired and worked under Reid when Reid first got there. And one of the things that Andy Reid always taught him, and I mean, it's almost like, you're talking to Buck Showalter or Aaron Boone, and you hear the cliche, can never have enough pitching. Howie Roseman believes you cannot have enough defensive linemen because they're going to get hurt during the course of the season. They're big people, and big, fast people, are probably a little bit more likely to get hurt than a lot of people are. So I think when you look at their defensive front, it's really going to be difficult, I think, to just keep them out when they keep sending wave after wave of guys. And look, Kansas City's got a good offensive line, but it's not as good as Philadelphia's. So I don't know. I think that's going to be the key to the game.
I know your time is valuable out there, so I won't keep you too much longer. But one last question, Super Bowl. I know you spoke with Nick Sirianni probably many times and have followed Andy Reid's career. I mean, that's another sort of interesting angle coming in, the familiarity with one another, the ties to the teams on opposite sides. How do you see this coaching chess match unfolding, and who do you think has the edge?
You know, Nick Sirianni, yeah, I rode to work with him last week one day, and I did not know Nick well at all. I still wouldn't say I know him well, but I think what's interesting about him is, I always have said this about Bill Belichick, every game plan is a snowflake. Every game plan is just so different when you watch the Patriots play. And I think that's the way Nick Sirianni prides himself. You know, he doesn't want teams to be able to get a read of his teams, either on offense or defense. So I think the way I look at this, Carolyn, is that he was trained, you know, at the very, you know, grassroots level of football at a small high school in Western New York. And then he went to a Division III school in Ohio, Mount Union. And that's where he began his coaching career as well. But I think he believes that there are eternal verities in football. And there are these truths in football that it doesn't matter what level you're playing on. You have to do X things well. And it sounds incredibly cliche. It really does. But he is just a big believer in teaching players everything about their positions and just continue to drill over and over and over again. Like yesterday at their practice, you know, their offensive line coach, who we talked about, Jeff Stoutland, basically had a technique practice. You know, he wanted just to make sure that everybody does things, their footwork is right, their hand placement is correct, all that kind of stuff. And that, to me, is what I think the hallmark, whatever happens to Nick Sirianni in his career, I think that's going to be his hallmark, that he has really, really technically sound players, whether they're spectacular, whether they win more than they lose, whatever it is. I don't think they're going to get beaten. And I also think most often they're going to win the turnover battle, because he's an absolute nut job about hanging on to the ball and not throwing it to the other team.
One of the reasons why you're one of the great American sports writers to me is the way that you're able to humanize these characters that we always are so focused on and looking through the lens of what happens on Sunday. And to read about, you know, your conversation with Sirianni and to dig a little deeper and hear about his father and how that kind of shaped his formative years and thinking about football is worth the time for anybody out there, because it's so fascinating. And you have a way of just breaking these characters down and making us understand what makes them tick. And I'm curious about what you think about Sean Payton going to Denver, because what we saw happen to Russell Wilson this past season shocked so many people. I mean, is he the right fit? Did Denver pay the right price? And can he ultimately fix what ailed them last season?
First of all, thank you so much for the kind words. I think it is a fantastic hire for Denver. Now, I don't think any of us can predict with any reliability how good Russell Wilson is going to be, because he was a disaster last year. And it's bizarre. Everything went. His completion percentage, his mobility. He just, the weird thing about Russell Wilson, who I've always thought is one of the most confident human beings I've ever met, he looked like he totally lost his confidence. You know, like when Steve Sachs and Chuck Knobloch lost the ability to throw the ball to first base. That's what I don't know what happened. I don't know. But all I do know is this. You know, from somebody, you know, at the Broncos was telling me that Russell really, really wants Sean Payton because he wants somebody he knows who can fix him, you know, and knows who's going to be a tough coach on him. Excuse me. And I think for that reason, I love the pick, because the quarterback has to get fixed for them to have a chance to turn it around. Who is the human being on the planet who is available, who has the best chance to fix them? Probably Sean Payton. Here's the one other thing that's interesting, Carolyn, about Russell Wilson. I find it interesting. He's very tight with Drew Brees. They live in the same, I shouldn't say they live. They have homes in the same neighborhood in San Diego. Brees lives there full time. I don't know if Russell still lives there or what the deal is, but they've gotten to be close. And Drew Brees basically said, you need Sean Payton in your life, in so many ways. And so I think, this is a cliche of cliches. If anybody can fix Russell Wilson, they hired the right guy. And look, it might cost him 90 or 100 million bucks, whatever his contract is for 5 years. But, I'm not going to cry for the Walton family having to pay a big price for a head coach, It's
interesting because I don't think of Pete Carroll, for example, as a guy that will ride a quarterback or do that tough kind of love. I don't know him day in and day out in practices like that, but I think of him as a different sort of coach, as a motivator, as a rah-rah guy, as a sunshine guy. And it sounds like Russell Wilson is making it explicitly clear, at least through your reporting and things that I've read, that he needs something different right now at this stage in his career.
I think he knows that he needs to be coached hard, and he needs to be very malleable starting in the spring. He needs to listen to coaching, and he needs to, I don't want to be, make it sound, silly, but he's got to obey Sean Payton. Mm-hmm. He's got to listen to the coaching and do what Payton says. I think if he does, he's got a good chance of being a reclamation project.
Interesting. I'll get you out of here with this, Peter. Aaron Rodgers is now going into a 4-day darkness retreat. I don't want to laugh because I don't want to make light of his beliefs. This is something he feels he needs a self-reflection sort of period to get clarity and figure out what he's going to do. What do you think he's going to do?
My gut feeling, and Carolyn, I don't know what he's going to do. I'm not close to Aaron Rodgers. I don't have a line into his camp, a reliable line into his camp. But I just try to look at it in human terms. His reputation last year was sullied as a player. And I think one of the things about Rodgers right now that is kind of important to realize, he's an incredibly prideful guy. And I don't think, there's two things. One, I don't think he wants to go out like that, number one. And number two, so he's not heavily involved in like off-season programs or whatever. He basically is a July to January employee, okay? So if somebody told you that you can report to work on July 25th and you'll be done at some point in January and we'll pay you $60 million for those 6 months, would you do it? And again, I don't mean to make it all about the money, but to me, it's pretty hard, no matter how much money you have, to turn down $10 million a month to do something you really like to do. Mm-hmm. So in that way, I'm thinking more in kind of basic logic terms. And that might not be the way he's thinking, but that certainly would be the way I'm thinking. And all this other stuff, how he's going to go away and be in darkness. Aaron Rodgers I don't remember the last time he did something normal. He just is, he stands custom all the time on its head. So I don't know what it means. I don't know what he's going to do, but I'll tell you what I'd do if I were him. I would play, and I would basically say to the New York Jets, trade for me and I'll play for you for the next 2 years. I'll commit to you for 2 years. And the reason is, the Jets probably have the best defense of any team that is out there, that needs a quarterback. And if I were him, that's what I'd be looking for. Now, it's inconvenient that they'd be in the same division as the Bills and in the same conference as Mahomes and Burrow and Justin Herbert. I get it. But, everybody thought Brady was nuts to go to Tampa Bay, and look what happened.
Yeah, and if I'm the Jets, with what happened to the quarterback position, that's something that I would give a lot of thought to, bringing a guy like that in even for a short period of time. Peter King, thank you for the time. Always appreciate your insight, and enjoy the weekend.
Hey, enjoyed it, Carolyn. Thanks a lot.